Thinking about detection versus prevention at the data layer, but as AI agents execute actions autonomously at speed, at scale, is monitoring still enough? And how do you think of like hard preventative controls at the data layer, for example, where agents can take actions? How do you think of that?
Okay, so yeah, I absolutely think that we are moving to prevention. We must move to prevention, okay? This is the term we use on the AI security side, which are driven by the understanding of what data is going to be accessed by the agents. Every application that will not be AI infused will die because the AI infused applications are going to be better. Maybe the most important thing is I'd say 99.9999999% of us, of all people, even extremely technical and extremely deep people, don't actually understand how this thing works.
When you look at agentic AI, giving agents the ability to query, summarize, act on enterprise data at scale, do you think that thesis is even stronger now?
Oh wow, this is like really...
Thank you for joining the Resilient Cyber Show. My name is Chris Hughes, and today I'm joined by Ron Benetton. Sorry, we were talking about your name before we went live, and I tripped myself up. But Ron, thanks so much for being on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to chat. You have a pretty interesting background, as I was digging in here, as a founder, been through an M&A activity, obviously very technical as well. But for folks that don't know you and don't know your background so well, can you tell us a bit about your background?
Sure. I'm a data security guy. Been at it for about 30 years. Had some good fortune. Was one of the founders at Guardium that got acquired by IBM. Then JSonar got acquired by Imperva, and then kind of moved off into AI security because it's like super interesting. And then got acquired by Varonis. So yeah, I've been in this area. AI security and data security are so tightly coupled that it was very natural for me, but also it's like I think that within Varonis it's like super great because you get both the data security and the AI security together. So yeah, I'm pretty happy.
That was actually going to be the first question I asked you is like, knowing that you've been through these M&A activities and have a long background focusing on both AI and data, I'm curious, like what drew you to Varonis, as a platform, right, to tackle the AI security problem? And is it, knowing their data-centric, kind of background and that being an anchor for AI security, is that how you view it?
Yeah, I've known Varonis forever because, my first kind of startup in this space was Guardium, and that was around 2002, and Varonis started in 2005. And we always split the world into, like, we were the structured data security side, and they were the unstructured data security side. So I always looked at how they were growing and what they were doing, and was always like, oh wow, this is like really, I wish we could have done that. And then I always felt that the two need to be together. Like it never made sense to me that it got split up into structured and unstructured because the policies are the same, the motions are the same. So I know them. I know them forever and always had like the utmost respect for them. And I think recently we kind of look at structured and unstructured together. And now, the reason it made so much sense to me is that there's a limit to what you can do by just looking at the prompts and looking at the way that the agents are acting if you don't understand the data that they're accessing. And so it made like a ton of sense to me that, this needs to be together with the Varonis platform. And now that I'm here, it makes even more sense. Like I can see what benefits we can have both on the data security side because all the data is now being accessed by AI agents, and also on the AI security side, which allows us to just provide, very deep guardrails, okay, which is a term we use on the AI security side, which are which are driven by the understanding of what data is going to be accessed by the agents.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I was going to ask you this, kind of a bit of a, I guess, a technical and a kind of competitive question, because it seems like things have come full circle for you now. You're at Varonis and an opportunity to kind of drive to fruition what you think should be. When we talk about like data as a persistent attack surface, like Varonis has long operated on the thesis that data is the real perimeter, not the network, not the endpoint. When you look at agentic AI and the ability to kind of query, giving agents the ability to query, summarize, act on enterprise data at scale, do you think that thesis is even stronger now? And does it give Varonis a structural advantage, over other vendors who maybe come at it from, the agent, the prompts, the identity, for example? Like, how do you think of that?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think I'm not sure there's a single thesis that is the only correct thesis. I think like AI security, AI in itself is so disruptive and so all-encompassing. There's nothing that's gonna stand in the way of this wave, right? Or standing in the way of this wave. Everything becomes AI. There is no application that doesn't become an AI-infused application. Every application that will not be AI-infused will die because the AI-infused applications are going to be better. So AI changes everything, every application, every use case, every way that we as humans work. So if it's so all-encompassing, it's hard. I don't want to be like that person who's like so narrow-minded to think that there's only one thesis. However, if you look at the application stack, for 40 years, we had a very clear application like structure. Okay, there's a user talking to an application, talking to a database or a file server or whatever the repository is. And that layer in the middle that has been probably the most important layer is kind of maybe going away, or at least let's put it this way: the stock market believes it's going away because this whole AI is killing SaaS and we lost $1 trillion of valuation. Like somebody believes that layer is going away, and if that layer is going away and being replaced by like users giving instructions to an AI agent that is able to connect to all of these things, then the question is, so what remains? Okay, so yeah, the AI agents need a control plane and need access control policies and security around them. But really, the thing that does remain and will remain forever is the data layer. And so if you think about it this way, or this is one of the theses, is that the most natural place where you can gain the best signals for kind of AI security is the data layer. I'm not saying it's the only thesis. It's certainly a thesis that I believe in.
Yeah, I like that you're, I guess, humble enough to admit that, there's maybe more than one way to skin a cat, I guess you'd say, like to use an analogy, even though you all have a very, kind of specific viewpoint or perspective of how you, view the market and come at problems. Like you're admitting that there's many ways to get at this problem. And I think you're spot on in the sense that everything will be AI. I kind of quip it's a horizontal, not a vertical, or I compare it to like a utility, like electricity. Like it will just be ubiquitous and kind of touch everything at this point. I don't think anything will survive without touching it or using it or leveraging it, that kind of thing. But many folks, look at the kind of the market of AI security right now and feel it, and this is the title of the conversation, why AI security feels so fragile. From where you sit at Varonis, like what's the core driver? Is it the non-deterministic nature of the models, the data exposure patterns that AI creates, broken identity and permission models, or something else? And what do you see in the customer environments, within Varonis that kind of validate that?
I pay attention to words, so when I saw the title that you chose, I wanted to think about it a little bit. So I thought, okay, what does fragile actually mean? Okay, and I even looked it up in the dictionary because I think we all know what fragile means. But so I found some interesting things like what attributes make something fragile, and there were things like, okay, it needs careful handling, it's sensitive to pressure, it's easily affected by change, and at least when you think about those three things, it is very true that these three attributes certainly apply to AI and AI security and controls, right? It definitely needs careful handling, okay, because it's just so powerful, okay? It's certainly sensitive to pressure, and we know that um, because it's non-deterministic, because it's stochastic, and maybe the most important thing is I'd say 99.9999999% of us, of all people, even extremely technical and extremely deep people, don't actually understand how this thing works, and it's a black box. And maybe the most important one, it's like, it's easily affected by change, but in this space, the problem is, or not the problem, but the reality is that change is so quick. Okay, it's like the pace that this thing evolves is something we've never seen before. Not that it's not like a little greater than what we've seen before. It's nothing even. It's not the same. It's not the same formula. Like if previous change was linear or polynomial, this thing is exponential. Okay, so like the change we've had in the last 3 months is way more than we've had in the last year, and the change we've had in the last year is way more than the change we've had in the last 30 years. Way, way, way more. Like I learned AI in my undergrad, okay, which I'm not going to say how long it was, so I don't how old I am, but it's nothing like anything we've seen now, and what happened in the last 3 months is that greater. So I think that what makes it, quote unquote fragile, or at least not if it's not fragile, at least it's something that we need to think of as fragile in the way that we handle it, is really these two things: that it's a black box. We still don't know exactly what it's capable of. And it changes so quickly that by the time we think we know what it's capable of, it's completely changed. And now it's capable of way, way more. And I think that's what makes it fragile.
Yeah, I like that framing. I guess to make a little bit of a play on words, we could say, you and many others, right, are anti-fragile in the sense that you all continue to adapt, evolve, and learn. As you said, what you learned in undergrad around AI is completely different to what it is now, and it is moving so quickly. Like I just saw a blog this morning, from an autonomous pen testing company, right? They're talking about testing GPT 5.5 and the cyber capabilities, and it's like Mythos now is old news, and that was like 2 weeks ago, and it's just moving so rapidly in this space. It's exciting and overwhelming at the same time, right? It just feels so hard to keep up, but we do our best, right? I wanted to ask you too. Before joining Varonis, you were building Altru AI, specifically around AI security and governance. What gaps were you solving for there, and how did you bring that experience into Varonis, like to kind of shape how the company is thinking about AI security as a product and a category?
Yeah, the premise at Altru. There's no shortage. I mean, because AI is so all-encompassing, then there's also no shortage of like AI security tooling. Okay, the thing that we took a slightly different approach was, like, we all know from all our collective experience, and I know this from many decades of implementing security inside organizations, is that very often the thing which makes for success or failure is not the technology itself, it's or the tooling itself, it's the consumability of it. It's like enterprises and generally organizations. It's not like you give them something and you're automatically assured that it's going to be a successful implementation. And we looked at this and we said, kind of the way this is going with the complexity of just AI itself, plus the fact that it's extremely heterogeneous, this by Anthropic and this by OpenAI and this by Google and this by AWS and this by Microsoft and like 100 different vendors, and you want to create something that's somewhat consistent, so that creates another dimension of complexity. And then there's another dimension of complexity, which is, what does this secure lifecycle look like? Okay, so is it about red teaming? Is it about guardrails? Is it about inventory? Is it about governance? We just said the world of the user is going to be a nightmare, okay, because of these three dimensions of complexity. So we said, okay, we need to make something that's going to be less friction. It's going to be less, let's like categories. We as people, we have this tendency that when something complex comes along, we say, okay, let's just create a bunch of buckets, okay? And each bucket we can kind of understand. But then we end up with like 20 buckets, and we have to do something in 20 buckets, and then it becomes overwhelming in a different way. So yeah, we broke down the concept into a bunch of buckets. But now we have another challenge. So the premise at AllTrue was, we have to give something that is more consumable. And then, or another example is, we have this notion of, okay, governance is different than the controls, than the control plane, and security. And then you have people running like crazy on the governance side, and you have people running like crazy on the security side, and they diverge, which makes no sense, okay? Which makes no sense. We're trying to achieve the same thing. We're trying to achieve a concept of like safe AI, and we're like totally separating. So we kind of wanted to bring it together and create a path for someone to be able to achieve this safe AI utopia in a more straightforward way. And we brought that into the Varonis world because of this relationship with data. By the way, in the data world, there's always been the same thing. I lived in data security for over 25 years, and we always did data security, and there was always somebody rushing off and doing data governance, okay, which is, what exactly is that, okay? And it ended up that we could fold it together, because like the data governance stayed as a pie in the sky type thing, but we brought it down to earth, okay? And I think the same is going to happen with AI security and AI governance, or GRC, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I think you're right there, and I've worked in large, complex organizations, a lot of bureaucracy and things like that, and you often have these like disconnected groups of AI, or not AI, but data steering committees and things like that. They're very disconnected from the security and the practical implementation of how you're governing and securing the data. So I think coupling the two and making it more practical and actionable through the platform is key, and is going to be more valuable from a risk mitigation perspective as well. You joked about categories and humans needing categories. On that note, Varonis has owned the data access governance or categories like DSPM, right, for years. But the threat model has changed a little bit with the introduction of agentic AI and AI agents. AI agents are now first-class principals in the enterprise environment, not just users, right? So how do you think Varonis is and planning to extend the platform to account for agents that autonomously query, move, act on sensitive data? And what does that look like in practice?
Yeah, I know exactly how Varonis is going to address this. You're absolutely right. The access patterns are completely changed with autonomous agents. And in fact, they will very quickly evolve that becomes the main access point. And it's not, and it's even not, to a level that I don't think we truly understand. But whoever is kind of in the trenches can see it happening, okay? And it's going to happen for two main reasons. The first is just the number of these autonomous agents is skyrocketing, right? I think it was like the CEO of NVIDIA said something like that he foresees that his own company, NVIDIA, okay, will be a 50,000 employee company with 100 million AI assistants or agents. Okay, so that ratio is 1 to 2,000. So every human will have 2,000 agents working for each human. So if you just about think about that scale, and let's say he's exaggerating because of course he wants everything to be AI agents because that's more NVIDIA hardware selling. But say it's even 1 to 100. Okay, so what that means is that and you couple that with the fact that that middle layer of the application is also replaced by AI agents. So you're getting to a point that even if you assume something conservative like 1 to 100, 99% of access is these AI agents. Okay, so it almost means, and you know how in security we never have enough time and budget to do everything, and we have to prioritize. It kind of means that is the only important access pattern at this point, or soon, right? So of course this is something that changes everything, and so on the Varonis side, this was one of the big like reasons for, I think, for the Varonis acquisition of Altru is that we have to Varonis, or we have to kind of extend. It's kind of like if you think of the layers and you say, okay, the data layers here, and now here there's like applications, there's service accounts, there's humans, and now there's these agents. So we need, in order to do, like, we can stay here at the data layer because that is like the lowest common denominator, right? That is always relevant. This is what you said before, that Varonis always believed that that's the real perimeter, okay, that never changes. I think that's still true. That is still the layer that never goes away. But when you stay at the level of the lowest common denominator, then of course the signals that you have are the lowest common denominator. And the more understanding you have going up into each one of these things, you can do a better job. So like, for example, in the old world, when you had the data layer and the application layer, you could do some things at the data layer and you can do some things at the application layer. But if you had both layers, you can do a much better job, okay? Because you understood what the original access request was at the application layer, you understood what it translated to on the data layer, and you can you can create better policy enforcement. It's the same true with agents. If you understand what the agent is trying to do, what the real intent is, what the chain of thought is, and then you also see what it translates to at the data layer, you can do a much better job than if you only see the accesses at the data layer and you don't understand the context. Okay, and so that's the whole thing. Okay, is understanding what the agent is doing, what it's thinking. Right, this thing is thinking. Okay, that's the important thing to understand. This is not. It's actually in many ways what we're doing now from a security perspective is even way more. It's more fundamental of what we're trying to do than what we did with people. Right? When we looked at users accessing data, we understood what the user was asking, but we never said things like, can we understand what the user is thinking? We never said that, right? But when you look at agentic security, it's exactly what we're saying. We're saying we're trying to understand what its thought process is so that we understand when what it's doing doesn't make any sense anymore.
Yeah, you're actually getting into, I think a lot of folks are, kind of using the phrase intent analysis, right? Like what's the intent? Or others have called it like mission is kind of a terminology that's been taken about in the identity space around agents. And it's funny you talked about the the access pattern being the predominant access pattern being tied to agents as so fundamental as you framed it. Like one of the most consistent findings when we look at agentic AI security research, which is no surprise because we've struggled with this for years or decades with human users, is that they're being deployed with kind of massively over permissioned access, right? So you have this concept of least privilege for agents, or now some will say least autonomy, right? And Varonis has been fighting that least privilege battle for years when it comes from a data-centric kind of perspective. What makes it so much more difficult with AI agents? And how do you think about enforcing like least privilege and or least autonomy, maybe from a data-centric perspective when we're talking about these autonomous systems?
Those are difficult, really difficult questions. So certainly, like the thing that you're pointing out of this spectrum it is a spectrum. It's like a sliding scale. It's always, and it's a sliding scale that we always have to live with in daily life. Like if we're training models, we care about false positives and false negatives, and it's a slider. Like you can't get something perfect. You always have to find the balance. Even when you're working in Word and you have that little slider at the bottom that makes things bigger or smaller, it's easier to see, but you have less stuff. It's the same thing here. On the one side, we want full autonomy, okay, because this thing is super smart and it's getting smarter way, way faster than anything else. So like if you take an extreme and you say like if this thing is so smart and can help me with anything that I do, then it should run. I should give it access to every single thing in the company, every single piece of data. I should allow it to call any API I have in all of my systems, and I should probably give it all admin privileges because hey, it's so smart. It can do anything, and so, why shouldn't I do that, right? And I think that's the viewpoint of, maybe the business, okay? And the business tries to think about it only, now nobody as stupid as that to do what I just said, but in theory, if it was so smart, and also I could tell it not to do anything wrong. Okay, then yeah, that would probably be the right answer. The thing is, and I always think of it as one of the things that always surprises me with people. Okay, is that people themselves, lack common sense, right? I mean, like the most important attribute of any person is common sense, okay? Because you give somebody a task, a person, okay? You give a person a task, and then you follow up after a week, and you say, "What? How did you get to that from what I said? Where did you get that from?" Okay, and the same thing is happening with agents. Okay, you give it an instruction, you let it off, and then you come in the morning and you say, "What? This is what you did?" So we can't do the extreme yet, okay? We can't just connect it to everything. I mean, that'll be clearly a disaster, okay? It'll be back to the, I don't know, when I was a kid, there was a movie called War Games, okay, where the thing eventually started a nuclear attack and counterattack, right? I mean, yeah, connect it to all our nuclear weapons if it's so smart, right? So we're never going to get there. And the question is, okay, so how do we balance this? And on the flip side, we don't, like the other extreme is, what? We don't trust it at all. Every single decision it's going to make, every single API call, every single data access, we want a human in the loop. Okay? And then we know it'll never deviate. Or at least we align it we align it with a human making the decision, which, by the way, humans also don't make really great decisions. Okay, so like it always makes me laugh when like a Tesla car makes a mistake and has an accident, the whole world blows up. But you say, well, how many accidents happen because of people? Okay, so it's kind of like, a human in the loop on every decision is also certainly not the right thing if we want any benefit whatsoever. So the question is, where on that sliding scale is the right answer? Okay, and what is it based on? So one train of thought is least privileges and the permission model, and it's certainly a starting point, but I think that we all have to be aware that because the model is different than what we've known before, then I think, at least at a philosophical level, it should be clear to us that we can't try to do it with exactly the same structure. This isn't about minimal permissions and privileges the way we thought of them before. There are certainly cases where we need to put these things, okay, which we call guardrails, which are based on over permissions and over privileges, and maybe even descoping things automatically. But I think that because the decision process needs to be autonomous and is non-deterministic, that also the permissioning model cannot be deterministic.
Yeah. I think it's kind of a trick question because there's no silver bullet, basically. Like, as you were speaking there, I think there's the phrase I've been using is like the security usability paradox or trade-off. Like the business, these things are so compelling because it can do so much. It's so capable. And from a security perspective, it's so concerning because it can do so much because it's so capable. And then your comment about, kind of the levels of autonomy. There's actually a great paper. It's called Levels of Autonomy for AI Agents. And they present in there a visualization. I'll shoot you a link afterwards, but they have a spectrum of like user involvement versus agent autonomy, and it kind of progresses from user as an operator, to a collaborator, consultant, all the way through to the user just being an observer, right? And as you said, that's a spectrum, and it's going to depend on each organization, on each use case, on each, the data sensitivity, system criticality, like all these kind of factors that will, play a part in that. And I think that it's going to look different for every organization as they navigate those kind of use cases, right? So I guess the last technical question I had for you here is, thinking about detection versus prevention at the data layer. Like things like database activity monitoring, was fundamentally from a detect and alert model, right? And Varonis, has evolved well beyond that. But as AI agents execute actions autonomously at speed, at scale, is monitoring still enough? And how do you think of like hard preventative controls at the data layer, for example, where agents can take actions? How do you think of that?
Yeah, I absolutely think that we are moving to prevention. We must move to prevention, okay? And I'll tell you why. And again, I apologize, and I work all my life at a technical level, but I think it's really important to think very deeply about these things. Otherwise, you do the wrong things from a technical perspective. So you look at this and you say, okay, there's these agents, and the agents are very smart and they have autonomy, and what are they different than people? Okay, like are they, or are they just a lot of people? Like, is this ratio of 1 to 2,000? What does it mean? Does it mean that the company now has 100 million people instead of 50,000 people, or does it mean that it still has 50,000 people and it has 100 million of other things? Okay, and the answer is, to me, they still have 50,000 people and 100 million. And there is something very fundamental that's different between agents and people, at least now. Okay, maybe the people who are building the models will figure out how to make them like real people. But the thing that changes right now, or that's different right now, is the fact that these agents have no accountability. They don't get a salary. Okay, they're not afraid of being fired. They don't have a family to feed. They don't actually care if you shut them. I mean, at least now they don't care if you shut them off, and that creates a certain difference. Okay, because when you think of all detective controls, okay, and like database activity monitoring was always that. It was always database activity monitoring. Okay, there were all kinds of phases in the middle that somebody called it. I remember there was a name called what decap data something. I don't know, but it was also like prevention. Okay, like prevent. Okay, but it never stuck, and the technology was always about monitoring, and you were monitoring things because when you tell a person, hey, there's a camera and it's recording everything you're doing, then it just changes the way it changes what most people, like some people are, are psychopaths, but apart from the psychopaths, we care. We look at the camera and we say, oh, we're gonna be more careful. Okay. And DAM was always one of those things. It's a detective control. But if all access is now through agents, and agents don't care if they're being fired, okay? So detective controls are less effective, okay? And also, detective controls, there's a certain lag, okay? Like you monitor, it moves here, there's a certain pipeline, you figure out what the anomaly is, you send an alert, it goes to the SOC, somebody takes action. When the access patterns are at machine speed, that's not effective anymore. Okay, and therefore, yeah, everything is moving more to a preventive control. Plus, if you do go a little bit up the stack, and you're trying to analyze intent, and you're succeeding in analyzing intent, then remember before, I talked about the fact that if you only see things at the data layer and you don't have the context, it's harder to make sense out of it, and therefore it's also harder to say, is this okay or not? But if you have the context and you have the chain of thought and you have the intent, it's much, much easier to say, well, I'm not sure that you should be doing this thing, and so, I'll put you in a queue, and let's wait with this. Let's do this thing. Okay, fine. Let's check this. So yeah, I think the world is going to get way better on fewer detective controls and a little better on the on the assurance. It's not even preventive. It's assurance.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking about, I couldn't help but think of the OODA loop as you were talking there, like, the observe, orient, decide, act. I think that OODA loop in the machine scale and speed and velocity that you were talking about, it's just got exponentially shortened, right? So like we need to be able to, close that OODA loop so much faster, right? In terms of monitoring and then actually preventing behaviors when it comes to agents and data access and things like that. And I actually like how you thought throughout this conversation, I just want to throw it out there, how you kind of spoke in analogies and drew from past experience as well in this space as someone who's been around data security and AI for so long. And now where it's going is fascinating to see the direction that's going. So Ron, thanks so much for jumping on and chatting with me and giving us an insight into where we've been and where Varonis is headed as well. I really appreciate the chat.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye.